He bought a lonely cabin. The mountain's daughter awaited there with a secret promise he had never planned to live in the mountains. For most of his life, he had been surrounded by noise, cars, phones, crowded streets, and voices that never seemed to stop. He worked long hours in the city, returned to a small apartment, and repeated the same routine every day. Over time, the noise outside slowly matched the noise inside his mind. Sleepless nights became normal. Silence felt impossible to find. After a series of personal losses and disappointments that he rarely spoke about, something inside him finally gave up. He did not want sympathy. He did not want advice. What he wanted was distance, from memories, from expectations, and from people who kept asking if he was doing okay. He wasn't, and pretending had become exhausting. One evening, while scrolling through property listings with no clear purpose, he saw it. A small wooden cabin, hidden deep in the mountains, far from towns and highways. The picture showed tall trees, mist hanging in the air, and a narrow path leading to the front door. The cabin looked old but strong, simple but peaceful. Something about it made him stop scrolling. He stared at the screen for a long time. The idea felt sudden, even foolish.
He had no experience with mountain life.
He had always depended on modern comforts and nearby stores. Still, the thought of being alone in that quiet place made his chest feel lighter. For the first time in months, he slept that night without waking up. Within weeks, he sold most of his belongings. Friends were confused. Some tried to talk him out of it. Others joked that he would return within a month. He smiled politely, but said little. Explaining his reasons felt unnecessary. This decision was not logical. It was personal.
The journey to the cabin took longer than expected. The road slowly changed from wide and smooth to narrow and uneven.
Phone signals disappeared. Trees grew closer together, blocking the sky. When he finally reached the last village before the mountain path, he stopped to ask for directions. The villagers looked at him with curiosity, but when he mentioned the cabin, their expressions changed. Slightly, not fear, but caution. An older man asked him why he wanted to live so far away. A woman reminded him that winters were long and harsh. Another warned him that help would not come quickly if something went wrong. He thanked them and said he needed peace. They nodded, as if they had heard that answer before. One of them quietly added that the mountain had its own ways and that not everyone stayed for long. He did not ask what that meant. The final stretch was only reachable by foot. He parked his vehicle, loaded his supplies into a backpack, and followed the path. The air felt cooler and cleaner with every step. Birds moved between the trees. Wind brushed against his face. It was quiet, not empty, but alive in a gentle way. When he reached the cabin, he stood still for several minutes. It was exactly as shown in the pictures, yet different. The wood was darkened by time. The windows reflected the trees like mirrors. The place felt watched, though not in a threatening way. More like the mountain was aware of him. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood and earth. It had one main room, a small kitchen area, and a sleeping space near the back. There was a fireplace, a wooden table, and shelves that held a few forgotten items. Dust covered most surfaces, but everything felt solid, cared for. That night, he lit a small fire and cooked a simple meal. As he ate, the silence pressed in around him. At first, it felt uncomfortable. His mind searched for familiar sounds, traffic, voices, music, but found none. Burst. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased. The silence did not judge him. It asked nothing from him. Over the next few days, he worked on settling in. He cleaned the cabin, organized supplies, and explored the nearby area. The forest seemed endless, yet he never felt lost. The paths felt natural, as if they guided him gently rather than confusing him. Despot. Still, strange details began to catch his attention. Firewood appeared stacked near the cabin one morning, even though he had not cut any yet. A broken step on the porch looked recently repaired. Once, he found fresh water placed neatly in a container outside his door. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Perhaps the previous owner had visited recently. Maybe a villager came by out of kindness. Yet, something felt different. The work looked careful, personal, as if done by someone who knew the cabin well. One evening, as the sun began to set, he heard footsteps nearby. He stepped outside, heart beating faster than expected. From between the trees, a young woman appeared. She moved quietly, confidently, as if the forest belonged to her. She wore simple clothes suited for the mountain, and her presence felt calm, almost blending with the surroundings. She did not seem surprised to see him. She greeted him politely and asked if he was settling in well. Her voice was soft but steady. He nodded, slightly unsure of what to say. He asked if she lived nearby. She smiled faintly and said she had always lived on the mountain. They spoke briefly. She pointed out where the weather changed quickly, where the path became dangerous after rain, and which areas were best avoided at night. She spoke as someone who knew the land deeply, not as someone repeating warnings. Before leaving, she looked at the cabin for a long moment. Then she said something that stayed with him long after she disappeared into the trees. "This place has been waiting," she said. He stood there alone, listening to the wind move through the branches. For the first time since arriving, he felt that his choice to come here might not have been entirely his own. The next morning he woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight filtered through the trees and slipped quietly into the cabin. The mountain felt calm, as if it had been holding its breath during the night and was now slowly waking up. For a few moments, he lay still, listening. No horns. No alarms. Only wind, birds, and distant movement he could not name. His thoughts returned to the young woman from the evening before. Her words echoed in his mind. This place has been waiting. He did not fully understand what she meant, but the way she said it felt serious, almost respectful. It was not a warning, it was something else. After a simple breakfast, he stepped outside. The air was cold but fresh. As he walked around the cabin, he noticed small signs that confirmed his growing curiosity. The firewood stack was neat and dry, protected from moisture. A narrow trail behind the cabin looked recently cleared. Someone had been here often. Later that day, he decided to walk toward the nearby stream she had mentioned. The path was easy to follow, as if used regularly. He found the water exactly where she said it would be, clean and steady. As he filled the container, he felt a strange sense of gratitude, though he wasn't sure to whom. On his way back, he saw her again. This time, she was sitting on a rock, repairing a simple tool. She looked up and greeted him as if meeting him there was expected. They walked together for a while. She spoke about the mountain as if it were a living companion. She explained how clouds move differently here, how animals reacted before storms, and how silence could teach patience if one allowed it. He told her, slowly and carefully, why he had left the city. He did not share every detail, but he spoke about feeling lost and tired. She listened without interrupting.
D-E-L.
When he finished, she nodded, as if his story fit into something she already understood. He asked her name, but she smiled gently and said that names mattered less on the mountain. People here were known by how they lived, not what they were called. He found that answer strange, yet comforting. Over the following days, she appeared often, sometimes near the cabin, sometimes on distant paths. She never arrived suddenly or loudly. It was as if she emerged naturally from the forest. Each time she shared knowledge that made his life easier, how to store food properly, how to read the sky, how to protect the cabin from strong winds. The villagers spoke about her too, though rarely and with care. When he went down to restock supplies, someone mentioned the mountain's daughter. They said her family had lived there longer than anyone remembered. Some believed the mountain itself had raised her. Others said she simply understood it better than most. He noticed that no one spoke badly about her. There was respect in their voices, even a quiet appreciation. As days turned into weeks, he began to feel less like a visitor and more like someone slowly finding balance. His sleep improved, but his thoughts became clearer. The heavy weight he had carried for years seemed to loosen its grip. One evening, as the sky darkened earlier than usual, she came by the cabin. She warned him that a strong storm would arrive by morning. Together, they secured loose items and reinforced the door. She worked with focus and confidence, moving as if she had done this many times before. When everything was ready, she stood near the doorway. The fire inside the cabin cast soft light across her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she said something that shifted the air between them.
"You were not the first to come here looking for peace," she said, "but you are different." He asked what she meant.
Pace. She explained that many had tried to escape the world by coming to the mountain. Most left when they realized the mountain demanded respect, patience, and responsibility in return. Few were willing to give those things. Then she added quietly, "The cabin does not accept everyone."
Her words stayed with him long after she left that night.
The storm arrived as promised. Wind pushed against the cabin, rain struck the roof, and the forest moved with powerful energy. Inside, he kept the fire steady and followed her instructions. The cabin held strong. Past, he felt a sense of achievement, not pride, but belonging. He had faced something difficult and endured it without running away. The next morning, the world looked freshly washed. Sunlight touched the wet leaves, and the air smelled clean. He stepped outside and saw her standing at a distance, watching the mountain. She turned toward him and smiled, this time more openly. "You're learning," she said. He realized then that his journey was no longer just about escaping his old life. Something deeper was unfolding, something connected to the land, the cabin, and the quiet woman who seemed to know far more than she revealed. And somewhere in the mountain's stillness, a promise waited to be understood. As time passed, the cabin no longer felt unfamiliar. The man learned its small sounds, the way the floor softly reacted to footsteps, how the walls responded to wind, and how the fire spoke when it needed more wood. The place began to feel less like a shelter and more like a quiet companion. One afternoon, while organizing one of the shelves, he noticed something he had missed before. Behind a row of old containers, there was a small wooden box. It was worn, but carefully made. When he opened it, he found a few letters tied together with a thin string.
The paper was old, yellowed by time, and the handwriting was careful and steady.
He did not read them right away. Something told him to wait. That evening, the mountain's daughter arrived as she often did, carrying fresh herbs and dried roots. She placed them on the table without explanation. He showed her the box. Her expression changed, not to fear, but to recognition. She touched the letters gently, as if greeting something familiar.
"These belong to my father," she said.
He sat quietly, waiting. She had never spoken about her family before, not directly. The fire crackled softly as she began to explain. Her father had been the caretaker of the mountain for most of his life. Not officially, not by title, but by choice. He believed the land was alive and deserved respect. He repaired paths, protected water sources, and kept outsiders from harming the forest.
The cabin, she said, was built by his hands many years ago.
It was never meant to belong to just anyone, she added. She explained that her father believed some places waited for the right people, those who arrived not with greed or plans, but with honesty and need. Over the years, many had stayed briefly in the cabin, but none had lasted. They wanted comfort without responsibility, peace without effort.
Her father used to say that the cabin would know when the right person came. The man listened closely, feeling a strange mix of surprise and understanding.
Many moments from the past weeks suddenly made sense. The repairs, the firewood, the feeling of being watched but not threatened. He asked why the cabin was sold if it was so important. She looked toward the window, where the trees stood quietly. "My father is gone," she said simply. Before he left this world, he made arrangements so the cabin would pass into new hands. He trusted the mountain to decide the rest.
Over the next few days, she told him more magically.
Her father had written about someone who would come carrying pain, not ambition. Someone who would listen more than speak. Someone who would stay through difficulty instead of running away. As she spoke, the man felt as if the words were describing him more clearly than he ever could himself. Curious, he finally asked if he could read the letters. Pshh, she nodded. That night, alone by the fire, he opened the bundle. The letters were not dramatic or mysterious. They spoke of seasons, storms, and quiet mornings.
They spoke of patience, care, and learning to live with less. In one letter, her father wrote about the cabin's future.
"When the one arrives who stays without being asked," the letter said, "teach them what the mountain teaches you. Then step back. The rest will unfold." The words stayed with him long after he placed the letters back in the box. The next week brought challenges. A fallen tree blocked part of the path, cutting off easy access to supplies. Instead of feeling frustrated, the man worked slowly, clearing what he could. The mountain's daughter joined him without being asked. They worked in silence, sharing understanding without words. Later, she showed him a small marking carved into a stone near the cabin.
It was old and simple. "My father carved that," she said. "It means protection." He realized then that the cabin was not just wood and nails, it was memory, effort, and belief shaped into a place.
One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky darken, she finally spoke about the promise. She did not give details, but her voice carried weight.
"My father believed that one day someone would come who needed the mountain as much as it needed them," she said. "When that person arrived, the role of protection would continue." He asked if she meant him.
She did not answer directly. Instead, she asked him a question. "If the mountain asked something difficult of you, would you stay?" He thought about his old life, the noise, the emptiness he had felt even among people, but he thought about the quiet mornings, the steady work, and the peace he had found here.
"Yes,"
he said honestly. "Race, I would." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. That night, the mountain felt different, not heavier, but closer. As he lay in bed, he realized his journey was no longer about healing alone. It was about becoming part of something older and stronger than himself. The cabin had not just given him shelter. It had opened a door to a life shaped by meaning, patience, and trust. And the promise, though still incomplete, was slowly taking form. The days grew shorter as the seasons slowly changed. The air became sharper, and the mountain carried a quiet seriousness, as if preparing for something important. The man felt it too. His movements became more careful, his thoughts more focused. Life here no longer felt like an escape. Des, I am paying. It felt like a responsibility he was slowly learning to accept. One evening, the mountain's daughter arrived later than usual. Her face looked thoughtful, and her steps were slower. She asked him to sit outside with her, near the old stone where her father had once carved the sign of protection. The sky was clear, filled with stars, and the forest stood still, listening. She told him it was time to speak openly.
She explained that her father had not only protected the mountain, but had also prepared for the day when he would no longer be there. He believed that the land needed a guardian, someone who would care for it without trying to control it.
This role was never forced. It could only be accepted freely. The promise was never written on paper, she said. It was spoken to the mountain itself. Her father promised that if the mountain sent someone willing to learn, to stay, and to protect without reward, then the mountain would give that person peace, purpose, and belonging. But the promise worked both ways. The land would give, but it would also ask. The man listened closely. He felt no fear, only respect. He understood now why the cabin felt alive, why the silence felt full instead of empty. She told him the difficult part had already begun. The mountain would test him, not to punish, but to understand his heart. Storms, isolation, and responsibility were not accidents. They were questions. That very night the wind returned stronger than before. Clouds gathered quickly, and the temperature dropped. She helped him prepare, then left before darkness fully settled. He wanted to ask her to stay, but something told him this part was meant to be faced alone. The storm lasted 2 days. Wraths. Snow fell heavily, covering paths and blocking access to the village. The cabin creaked under the weight of wind and cold. At times, fear tried to rise inside him, but he remembered everything he had learned. He kept the fire steady, cleared snow when it was safe, and stayed calm. There were moments when he could have panicked, moments when his old self would have given up, but he did not. He stayed. When the storm finally passed, the mountain stood silent and white. The world looked new, untouched. Exhausted but steady, he stepped outside and breathed deeply. He had not just survived, he had endured with patience. Later that day she returned. She looked at the cabin, the cleared path, and then at him. Her eyes showed quiet approval.
You answered, she said, simply, as till all.
She explained that many before him had left during storms like this, blaming the mountain for being too harsh, but the mountain was honest.
It showed exactly what it was. Those who stayed learned. Those who left were never judged.
That evening, she shared the final part of the promise.
Her father believed that when the right person arrived, he would no longer need to guide the mountain's daughter herself. She would not be alone in her role. Responsibility would be shared. You are not replacing anyone, she said. You are continuing something. The man felt the weight of her words, but also their warmth. For the first time in years, he did not feel small or lost. He felt useful. In the days that followed, he began to take on more tasks. He repaired parts of the path, checked water sources, and learned how to read signs in the land. The mountain's daughter guided him when needed, but stepped back when he showed understanding. Slowly, the mountain began to trust him. One morning, he noticed animals moving closer to the cabin, unafraid. The forest felt more open. The silence felt welcoming. One evening, as they stood together watching the sun disappear behind the peaks, she spoke softly. "The promise is nearly complete," she said. He did not ask what remained. He already knew. It was a choice made every day, to stay, to protect, and to live with respect.
He looked at the cabin, no longer lonely, no longer waiting.
And without speaking, he chose again. Spring arrived quietly on the mountain. Breath. Snow melted slowly, feeding the streams and waking the forest from its long rest. New leaves appeared on trees that once looked lifeless, and small flowers pushed through the soil near the cabin. The change felt gentle, but meaningful, like a deep breath after a long silence. The man noticed that he now woke up with purpose. His days were no longer empty or heavy. Each morning he checked the paths, the water, and the condition of the cabin. He did these things not because he had to, but because they felt right. The mountain was no longer something around him. It was something he was part of. The mountain's daughter was still there, but her presence had changed. She no longer guided him at every step. Instead, she observed, stepping in only when needed. There was trust now, quiet and strong. The villagers noticed the change, too. When he went down for supplies, they no longer looked at him like a visitor who would soon leave. They greeted him warmly and spoke to him with ease. Some thanked him for keeping the paths clear. Others mentioned how calm the mountain felt lately. One older villager said something that stayed with him. "The land knows who cares for it," the man said.
It always does.
Back at the cabin, life settled into a steady rhythm. He repaired what needed fixing, improved storage, and made the cabin stronger without changing its spirit.
He kept everything simple. The cabin did not need more. It needed care.
One evening, the mountain's daughter brought the wooden box with the letters and placed it on the table. "It belongs here," she said. "With you."
He understood what she meant. The past was no longer something separate.
It was something he was now carrying forward. They sat together outside as the sun lowered behind the peaks. The sky filled with soft colors, and the air carried warmth instead of cold. For a long time, they said nothing.
Then she spoke. "My father believed that when the promise was fulfilled, the mountain would no longer feel lonely," she said.
The man looked around. The trees, the cabin, the quiet, light. He realized something important. The loneliness he had carried from the city was gone too. Not because he escaped it, but because he faced it here, in the open. He asked her what she would do now. She smiled gently. Inspiration.
"What I have always done," she said. "Protect the mountain."
But not alone. From that day forward, their lives moved side by side, but not rushed, not planned far ahead. Just steady and honest. They worked together, shared meals, and learned from the land. Words were not always needed. The cabin was no longer known as a lonely place. Travelers spoke of it as a peaceful shelter. Some came seeking quiet. Some came curious. The man welcomed them briefly, offered guidance, and sent them away with respect for the mountain. No one stayed too long. The cabin was not meant for everyone.
Years passed, marked not by dates, but by seasons.
Storms came and went. Winters tested patience. Summers brought life and movement. Through it all, the man stayed. One morning, while repairing the old stone marking, he realized how much he had changed. He was no longer running from pain. Around in despair, he was no longer searching for meaning. He was living it. The mountain's daughter stood nearby, watching the forest move with the wind. She looked at him and nodded, as if confirming what the mountain already knew. The promise was complete, not because something dramatic happened, but because someone stayed. Because someone cared. Brace. Because someone listened. The cabin stood strong, no longer waiting. And the mountain, at peace, continued to breathe.